On today's Southern Spotlight, it's Social Justice Month here on campus. We will take an inside look at the Southern Students Against Gun Violence event, learn more about the NCAA sponsorship program for student athletes, and have a conversation with Southern's very own social justice advocate, Casey Counselor. This and more, coming up. Welcome to Southern Spotlight, the Social Justice Edition. I'm your host, Gary Robinson Jr. from Montclair, New Jersey. On November 10th in the Adante Student Center Ballroom, the Department of Multicultural Affairs hosted the Expressions of Social Justice Talent Show, which gave students a platform to link their talents to what social justice means and looks like to them and their community. The Southern campus joined to listen and support the powerful performances from their peers that told impactful stories surrounding social justice issues. The talent show was led by Diane Brown Albert and featured a panel of judges as students showed off their singing, piano, and dance skills. Faculty and talent show judge Eric LaCharity understands the importance of having more events like the talent show on campus, as the performances send inspiring messages to the audience and spread awareness.
The impact that it has is huge. What they're doing is important. Their commitment to social justice, like their talents and how they relate to what it is that they're trying to accomplish and the messages they're trying to send.
The Dreamers Action Alliance held its annual institutional financial aid application workshop on Wednesday, November 17th. The yearly event was held at Southern after the Connecticut General Assembly passed Public Act 18-2 in 2019. The program allows eligible undocumented students to receive financial aid to any of the Connecticut state universities and public colleges. Students can check their eligibility and apply for aid next year by visiting the Undocumented Students tab on the SCSU website. The priority is March 15th for returning students and February 15th for new and transfer students. November 20th marks the Transnational Day of Remembrance to honor trans victims of violence. The Sexuality and Gender Equality Center, best known as the SAGE Center, held its annual vigil 2 days before the national date and honored Southern student and SAGE ambassador Asher Wells. Family, friends, and faculty offered words of wisdom and anecdotes to those present in attendance. Speakers focused on spreading awareness about the ongoing discrimination the trans community faces. Event organizer Aaron Morabito reminds us there is more work to combat these issues and speaks about the importance of allyship on campus.
I think the first step into creating that welcoming community and being an ally to the transgender and non-binary community is to not only be informed, but also using that knowledge that you have to educate and speak up for others.
For years, the NCAA prohibited college athletes to receive endorsement deals. Now, the National Collegiate Athletic Association introduced a new form of social justice this past summer. Prohibited up until July 1st, athletes are now legally allowed to receive payment and compensation from their sponsorships while still attending university. We spoke to Turner Kelly, who gave insight to his recent involvement with the program rollout.
We're out here representing our schools, and we're bringing money in, revenue, profit, whatever it is. We're going ahead and we're putting all that on ourselves for what we do. Game day, competition day, or whatever we have, or even practice. We represent not only our school, but ourselves as well.
A capstone project that started off as students spreading awareness on a social justice issue transformed a degree requirement into one of the most impactful events that's ever taken place here on Southern's campus. Hosted by students in the university's Communication, Media, and Screening Studies Department, the Hour Preventing Gun Violence welcomed fellow students, faculty, and New Haven community members to join and listen to the courageous stories from families that have lost loved ones due to the devastations of gun violence. Southern student and event organizer Shana Smith believes the personal stories shared of those affected by the detriment of gun violence can help spread awareness and overall create a real impact.
I've lost friends to gun violence, so this is something that's very big in the New Haven community, and I really feel that we could change it, starting with the youth. He has a chance to change. We just have to get out and actually put forth the effort in hopes that, maybe this can. We are working to put together these events, so I feel like it's definitely having an impact on the community. Just one step at a time, literally one step at a time.
The event also welcomed a number of New Haven organizations and community leaders devoted to combating gun violence. Speakers shared how their programs are actively helping eliminate gun violence around the community, including an inspiring call to action on how you can get involved. Coming up, we have an interview with KC counselor, and today we'll be discussing his podcast, Real Talk, a diversity in higher education in his role as professor, social justice advocate, and scholar. Stay tuned for more. Welcome back to Southern Spotlight. We have a very special guest joining us today. He's an assistant professor here at Southern's Communication Department, as well as an author and illustrator of the published comic book Between Me and You, and co-host of the podcast Real Talk, a diversity in higher education. Please welcome artist, scholar, and social justice advocate, KC Counselor. KC, thank you for coming once again. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm great. We're at the end of the semester, so I'm, excited for the semester to be over, as I'm sure you are.
Absolutely.
But happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as we just mentioned, professor, author, co-host of a podcast, social justice advocate. What would you say brings you the most joy out of being an advocate for social justice?
I think it's really there's so much going on in the world right now, and I find there's a lot of reasons to despair. You could nail there's the climate, there's reproductive justice, racial justice issues ongoing. And for me, the points where I've felt the most hopeless is when I actually feel like I'm not doing anything that makes a difference. So I'm really grateful to be a teacher, to co-host the podcast, to make comics. All of those things for me are ways that I feel like I can make a difference, and feel like I am contributing to changing conversations. And I try to encourage other people to do the same thing, because that feeling of you see something that's an injustice, and if you don't feel like you have any power or any say over how that goes, it's devastating. So I'm always trying to encourage students, and people in general, to just really find what their thing is, their contribution, and to make it.
Absolutely. And speaking of contribution, you have a podcast, like we just mentioned, and how did that come about? Because I was listening to it and feel like I got a lot of education out of it. How did that come about?
Sure. So we have a new Vice President of Diversity, Diana Riza. She actually started a podcast with an alumni, Shantae Hanks, who works for the city. And they started the podcast. They did the first season, and through Diane and my working together, and she had also been working with Jamil Harp, my co-host, and she basically said, how about, I don't know if this is my best thing. Maybe you and Jamil want to do that. And at the time, Jamil was my student. So she really liked the idea that the two of us had a relationship, Jamil and I. Now we have a very close relationship. As podcast co-hosts, you have to be
Absolutely
real close. So anyway, we took it over from season 2, and we're just, as soon as I leave this interview, we're gonna wrap season 3 and then have season 4 in the spring. So I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I love the audio format. So when she offered that, it scared me and also seemed like a really great opportunity.
Right, and a lot of good things come out of things that scare you.
That's true.
Stepping
That's
out your
very
comfort
true.
zone. And to dive deeper into the podcast,
Yeah.
You had a recent episode that came out. What does it mean to be an American? You and Jamil and your guests, and you also had 12 other SCSU students talk
right.
about what does American mean to you. Now, also was mentioned about 2 Americas, whether
Yes,
it's
right.
The underprivileged or the privileged.
Yep.
What would you say are the necessary steps to bring these 2 Americas together?
Well, that's a big question. I think, a lot of folks in that podcast, everyone struggled with that question. What does it mean to be American? It's almost like, what does it mean to breathe air? And,
Right.
it's like, we have a lot of different ideas about what America means. And there were folks who pointed out, to me, the experience is one of struggle, or that obviously there's 2 New Havens. There's the Yale New Haven, and then there's the rest of New Haven.
Correct.
And we fall somewhere on that spectrum. But people have very different experiences of what it means to live in the United States and to be a citizen. So what do we do about that? Honestly, I don't know. It's so many things. But one thing that I think is imperative is that we keep having hard conversations and they don't always have to be hard. We keep having conversations about hard things, which is what we try to do on the podcast, is to have conversations that we're not seeing folks having, or not hearing enough of. Like when I first came to Southern, I felt like there was sort of a little bit of a cone of silence or something, or like I wasn't seeing, there were certain things that might happen, and then I was looking like, how come students aren't mad about this? Like, students should be getting mad about this, but everyone seems to just be going about their business. And so I think, the podcast is one way that we can generate more conversations to say, like, what do we see that's not right? Or what do we see that's, that we want to question or look into deeper? But I think that we really have to just be having conversations. We can't expect other people to do the work for us. So, it's there for us to do.
Correct. And speaking of conversation, there's a lot of conversation going on nowadays, whether it's social media or in person, about things that's going on in this country, all kind of issues. Now, people have different opinions on different things. How important do you think it is to seek to understand and not try to be right, but be heard?
Yeah, there are a lot of folks who say something to the effect of, like, that this idea of right and wrong as a binary is not that helpful. It's about, what's effective, what works, towards getting us to whatever goal we might be approaching. I think it's really important for people to be, like, seen and heard. And I think a lot of times what we have is, like, people express themselves, but that doesn't mean that they're actually heard on the other side. So I think, honestly, that's part of why I think communication is so interesting and so important, is because it is key to all of that work. And there's clearly a big need, right, for competent dialogue, conversation. I think storytelling is one of the most effective ways to get through to people and to learn and create change. I think that human storytelling component is one of the best ways to do it.
Absolutely. Definitely. Well, Casey, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show,
Thanks for
Southern
having me.
Spotlight. Really appreciate it. I love the insight that you just gave me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Problem. That wraps up this week's edition of Southern Spotlight. I'm Gary Robinson Jr. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.